Welcome back. Now, in case you haven't been with us this afternoon and you have not been on social media and you have not had a TV on or anything like that, let me just very quickly recap the story that we have been following for the last hour very, very closely. There was a verdict delivered just within the last 20 minutes in Minneapolis. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin has been convicted of murder and manslaughter in the death of George Floyd. This was a case that triggered worldwide protests and a complete re-examination by so many people who had not woken up to the issues of racism and policing in the United States and in other countries. This is not just a U.S. problem. The jury deliberated for about 10 hours since yesterday in total, and everybody was really on edge about what the verdict was going to be. George Floyd, he died last May after Chauvin, who was a white police officer, pinned his knee on the back of George Floyd's neck for about 9.5 minutes. Video of this horrific crime went around the world. And it was a breaking point for so many people. It inspired demonstrations worldwide, caused people, like I said, to wake up truly for the first time and take a closer look at what our systems are like around the world and systemic racism in general. And again, this is not just a problem in the United States. This happens in Canada, systemic racism, and it's something that we need to confront. But this is an amazingly important moment in the U.S. And also around the world, because the eyes of the world were watching this. And joining me on the line now to speak a little bit more about where we sit right now is Fareed Khan, founder of Canadians United Against Hate. Fareed, thank you so much for coming on the program on very short notice.
Well, thank you for calling me. This is a very historic moment that we're witnessing.
Indeed it is. And one of the biggest emotions that I have picked up on from people, and including myself, is relief that this was the verdict. Because if not now, when the evidence was so clear in this case, we had video footage, you had policing experts who said this was not protocol, this was not right, medical experts who came out to say that the primary reason of George Floyd's passing was this asphyxiation, then when is there going to a guilty verdict going to happen, if not now, when everything was presented for people to see?
Oh, yes, there couldn't have been anything but a guilty verdict based on all the evidence presented. But I think the key evidence that everyone needs to be reminded of, the key piece of evidence, is that 9.5-minute video where the world watched a man murdered in real time. This case is unlike any other similar case in the past where a black man has been killed, whether it's by a white police officer or a white man. The other case that sort of harkens back to this is the killing of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman in Florida. And in that case, the jury issued a verdict of not guilty. But in this case, the evidence was so damning, so overwhelming, and that video basically put the case to rest, and any other verdict would have been a travesty. And if that had happened, then I think you would have seen the streets of the U.S. explode in rage.
And in the contrast now, we have demonstrators and people who are gathered in Minneapolis, and I've heard chants already, again, to mark this time. But it's a strange thing to say, a celebration, but there's so much relief that this was the verdict that was delivered. And it's weird to say celebration because ultimately George Floyd died last year, 46 years old. To celebrate, it's strange, but at the same time, it's a watershed moment.
Yes, it is, and I think that this case has to be a point of reckoning to look at the way policing is done, not just in the U.S., but in Canada as well, because far too often black people and people of color are treated by police in a very racist manner. Their rights are violated frequently. We just had another shooting a couple of weeks ago, once again in Minneapolis, this time by a white police officer who was a woman. We're going to see what happens with that case. This case has to be a reckoning. It can't be used as a indication of, well, look, we got the job done, justice was done. Justice was done in this case, but there's a lot of cases where black men, black people, Indigenous people in Canada, people of color, do not see justice done, and we have to take a good hard look at the way policing is done so that these sorts of things don't continue to happen.
And further to your point, in our feed that we were carrying from CBS News in the United States, one of the commentators spoke to that idea of the need for change, the need for reform. And he mentioned that the testimony of other police experts, including the chief of police from Minneapolis, saying that this was not condoned by him, that this was not the training that they were given, it speaks to, and I don't want to misquote the gentleman, but he talked about how it was important for good cops to acknowledge that there are bad cops in the system and there need to be consequences for that. It's very important.
Absolutely. This is an example where the people who are in positions of authority within the police hierarchy actually stepped up and did the right thing. We don't have that happen too often. We have a case just recently in Ontario of George Chauvin, a 62-year-old man who was shot by police last year in Mississauga. The Special Investigations Unit did an investigation, and they found that there was no cause for liability against the police who shot Mr. Chaudhry. And Mr. Chaudhry was an infirm man with multiple health issues, and the fact that he posed a threat so much that he got shot and he was killed is unjustifiable. And this is the thing. We need to take a look at our police systems, the investigative systems, and good police officers need to step up and call out the injustice within their ranks, because it happens too often, and too often these people, these police officers, get away with murder. In this case, it didn't happen, but I think this is actually an exception to the rule.
And speaking in terms of cases involving individuals in crisis, mental health, circumstances, officers have said, and representatives have said that they are not trained to deal with those types of situations, and they would like very much to have other agencies step in. And I've seen, even a number of local police departments partner with mental health professionals to go out for crisis teams and rapid response. We need to see more of that, and that's part of the ongoing conversation about changes to the system, and not, having individuals who are not trained to help people in crisis going into those sorts of situations in the first place.
Well, in the Ajaz Chaudhry case, the family, who were the ones who called 911, they actually called for a social worker and EMT backup. They did not expect police to arrive. Mm-hmm. EMTs then referred it to the police, and the police showed up, and the family tried to implore the police not to harm him because he was mentally unstable, and he was having a moment, and they didn't listen to the family, and as a result, a 62-year-old man ended up dead. We do need to put more resources, and this whole issue that we have, the discussion that's going on out there about defunding the police, it's not about getting rid of the police. It's about taking some of the funds which are put into policing, which may be misdirected, and put them into the resources like, for example, mental health care and mental health response to deal with these sorts of issues so that people don't end up dead just because they're having a very bad mental health day.
It's very true, and the ongoing conversations are so important. They need to keep going, and as you've said, Fareed, this can't be a moment where people say, okay, justice has been done, let's move forward. This is going to be an ongoing situation where people need to examine what happens at the local level, and all members of our communities should feel safe and protected. And so I'm glad that you and I could have these conversations, especially on a day like today. As you said, it is historic, and I value so much the time that you've been able to share with us this afternoon. Thank you so much, Fareed.
Well, thank you once again for covering this. I think we're going to see a lot more coming out of this trial, and I'd be happy to come back and talk about it when it gets to the conviction phase.
Certainly, yeah. The sentencing will be...
the sentencing phase.
Yeah, no, for sure. There are going to be lots of conversations to come, and we will absolutely be back in touch with you. Until then, please do stay safe and take good care, okay?
Thank you again.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's Fareed Khan, founder of Canadians United Against Hate, discussing the information that we heard this afternoon to do with the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Found guilty on all counts that he faced, 2 of murder, 1 of manslaughter. And Derek Chauvin has been remanded into custody, bail revoked. And we saw footage from the courtroom of him being led away by officers. And now, as you heard Fareed mention, it's going to be about, I think the judge said 8 weeks until the sentencing will take place. And they'll have some other hearings and things to take place in the interim between now and then. But that, I believe, is when they said we could expect sentencing process to begin in about 8 weeks' time, so 2 months or so. But certainly this is a historic day, and we will continue our coverage of the situation in Minnesota and the very latest from Minneapolis. We are going to return to our CBS feed with our American coverage of what's going on right now. They're speaking continuously to legal experts and community leaders to bring you the latest on this developing story, the context, how people are feeling, and certainly we will continue to follow things very, very closely.